Today's going to be a bit of an unusual type of response video. See, we're going to be focusing on a Twitter thread that came about shortly after Count Dankula was convicted for his heinous crime of teaching his dog to insult Nazis by making it salute to Sieg Heil. The aforementioned Twitter thread concerns Count Dankula himself and a comedian by the name of Omid Djalili. Now, I've heard of Omid Djalili, he's actually quite a funny man. However, he took some exception to the company that Dankula keeps, and uses it as a method to justify the conviction. Whether it was sarcasm or not, I think it's wise we go through the entire thread. It is quite amusing. If Count Dankula accepts Tommy Robinson's support, then maybe the judge has seen the context. #NaziPug. Now, a few things we need to accept here. Firstly, Tommy Robinson had little to nothing to do with the case, besides reporting on it. In fact, that's about it. The only way I was able to get the verdict live was courtesy of him. It would have otherwise been Lauren Southern if she hadn't been kicked out of the country. Another thing, we have to accept that here, the judge would have not used Tommy Robinson as context, because he had, as earlier mentioned, nothing to do with the case. And thirdly, the context, as we now know, meant nothing because it was down to the judge to decide what Dankula was thinking, because context didn't matter, which, as we all know, was to piss his girlfriend off, which we all know it did. To which Dankula replied, "You know Tommy is pro-Israel, right?" Which is true. Omid's response, "Doesn't matter. His inclusion in your campaign is why intelligent people are not supporting you." Well, that's a damning statement about all the comedians that stood up for him then, which would include the likes of Dave Baddiel, Ricky Gervais, Shappi Khorsandi. You also have to add Majid Nawaz to this, who was very critical about the conviction on the LBC show. Another thing we have to add to this, the majority of those that are supportive of Count Dankula's conviction don't seem to understand the obvious joke, or if they do, they seem to have a remarkable view on justice. So for you to say that it is why intelligent people are not supporting you would be a bit inaccurate, since you yourself, being a comedian, didn't see the joke, get the joke, understand the joke. It's possible you're not woke enough. In any case, Count Dankula replied, "So due to the guilt by association fallacy, you are quite happy to allow free speech to be eroded?" Which is exactly what this is about. So when someone you don't like is fighting for something good that will benefit everyone, you won't support the good cause just because you don't like that person? Which seems to be how a lot of things go in politics these days. We don't see much of it where people reach across the table to get along with each other, instead sticking to their party and acting like children, the DNC being a perfect example of childish behaviour, the Labour Party and their remarkably anti-Semitic behaviour being just as bad, which, just as a side note, is one of the funniest things about the Labour Party, to preach about tolerance, acceptance, and yet they are the most anti-Semitic. With this case with Dankula, as Jonathan Pye quite well put it,
it tells you that both offence and humour are subjective. Either way, it was a fucking joke, you cunts!
Along with Matt Christensen.
Meow.
Although Jonathan Pye took a more comedic route, it was quite good.
Higsgeil! Fight the doys have Neuska! Never fucking springtime for Hitler!
I'll link it below. Now that joke has set a precedent for what is and is not offensive, it is a very slippery slope for what can and cannot be prosecuted, to the point where our speech is going to be curtailed. More authoritarianism, because that's what we need for our speech, of course. Less people to speak. Hell, this case just sets a precedent for what the thought police can actually do. They're able to ascertain what someone's thinking. When that person has told you what they're thinking, you've decided, no, this is what you were thinking. Omid Djalili's simple reply, yes. This led to a simple response between Dankula and Djalili of, that's a pretty destructive thing to do, but hey, you do you. Simply being nice. I assume at this point, with the amount of streams Dankula's done, he's probably exhausted right now, and just glad this is over before he goes to prison. And I stand by my comment on your video. I hope you do get a conjugal so we can all pay you a visit. We're probably going to give you soap and rope as well, just to keep you safe. Omid Djalili's simple response, because he's a simple person. Dude, had you actually been funny, I'd have been the first person to defend you. Ricky and Gervais had no idea of Tommy's support. Now, I do know that Dave Baddiel did comment about this somewhat with a tweet tagging Graham Lineman. The point is that the YouTubing alt-right are schooled in irony. They know to use comedy as a cover, as this instruction manual suggests. I have no idea at all if this is true of Count Dankula himself, whose right to do that joke I have supported. But it's interesting, and that's obviously in reference to a different conversation. I will link it in the description if you're interested. As far as Ricky Gervais goes, I couldn't find the tweet relevant to that at all, so I'm going to guess it's just an assertion right now or a private conversation. But Dankula's point here is something I think is really important. Why is it such a huge deal that you guys all agree on something? I honestly don't understand why you'd want to not fight for something good just because you don't like a person who wants to fight alongside you, which I think is interesting. Can anyone honestly say that they and all their friends or friend agree on absolutely everything in the world? I can tell you now with my hand on one of my hearts that my closest friend and I don't agree on everything. He votes Liberal, I do not. He voted to Remain, I voted to Brexit. He wanted Hillary Clinton to win. I wanted to win. The point is, it's all well and good agreeing on everything, but let's face it, if all you do is agree on everything, you're not really challenging each other, which is what I think is a fantastic element to any friendship. And this idea of not being willing to work with people you disagree with, it's almost reminiscent of pre-internet blood sports, where people had to go to extreme lengths, jumping through hoops to get an internet feminist to stream with you, unless it's Tim or Kevin, because those two actually are very funny to talk to. The point is, it shouldn't matter what we think, it should be our actions. And I know you want to use Tommy Robinson as a scapegoat here, but Count Dankula's actions should stand on their own merit. Who he interacts with is utterly irrelevant. If anything, this just shows how retarded the left has gotten, or has been for years in fact. And I do apologise to anyone who is a leftist that is being pigeonholed here, but you know the type I'm referring to, that refuse to leave the hug box or help on the grounds of guilt by association, because you're unwilling to work together for a common cause, which if you're unable to work together on this particular common cause, consider your exposure here. You are quite, or were once quite well known, certainly in movies and stand-up. We risk having more of our speech censored, and I get that that might seem like scaremongery, but Dankula's case has set that precedent. So Omid Djalili's reply is simply, "'Cause what you did was not good, and with Tommy in your camp it questions your intent and core beliefs." No, it doesn't. It tells me someone who is very outspoken is willing to help. You don't have to agree with him. Hell, I'm sure many people don't agree with how he goes about getting his views across. And we know that this is the case because people just attack him while wearing precious little snoods.
You think that's cool? Come on, you guys.
Oi!
Yes, adorable, right. You'll willingly jump a man, all six of you, so the media will paint it as him attacking one of you, so you'll all kick him while he's down, because you're so brave. To which Count Dankula has replied, and this is where he states what he believes, and I believe him. "I have Jewish friends, I'm anti-Nazi and anti-alt-right. I'm a comedian who makes offensive jokes, which is a type of comedy. It may not be your type of comedy."
You know, we love Nigerians, don't we? We love Nigerians. Oh, a drunk Nigerian is hilarious. Wow, wow! What are you talking about?
But there are plenty of comedians who are very, very good at insulting. A lot of whom are very quiet at the moment. I wonder why. Is it because quite a number of them on the BBC payroll, perhaps? You didn't like the joke, that's fine, but to hear such things from a professional comedian is bewildering, to be honest. To which Omid Djalili doesn't really respond to most of it and simply goes with, "If those are your beliefs, then you are sitting and smiling with Tommy Robinson is bewildering." To be honest, this interaction keeps going for quite some time and ends with pictures being exchanged and kisses. And Omid Djalili quoting a load of German, which I don't care about because it's German. We're British, and we're better. I want to end on this final point. I don't understand why people are so unwilling to discuss things. Couples do it, friends do it. Why is it getting to the point that we are unable to sit down and talk? In this particular corner of the internet, a lot of it relies on evidence, so I can understand why some are reluctant to step forward. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't, or you shouldn't be open to changing your mind. Omid Djalili here is a perfect example of someone who is so far to one side and is just looking at somebody as if they're an enemy but not showing any kind of integrity. And is also showing that he doesn't know the person, or is unwilling to engage with someone who says a certain thing. I'm guessing in this instance it has something to do with Islam, which wouldn't surprise me too much. Tommy is quite outspoken about Islam, and rightly so. In our country, a lot of things are happening in the name of Islam and it's not being talked about. And Tommy is one of the very few people calling it out. Somebody who's willing to put his face out there. Somebody who's willing to stand in front of Muslims and talk. Even if some of them get violent with him, he will talk. You can guilt by association people as much as you want. It doesn't change the fact that these people are willing to talk, and you are not. Which continues to baffle me as to how somehow you get to sit on your high horse, look down on everyone and say you can't talk to these people because they say the wrong things, and yet you are unwilling to talk to those same people. Omid Djalili, if you are so passionate about this, why not go on the Kumite with Dankula and talk about it? Or go on the Kumite with Tommy Robinson. I know you don't want to talk to him because you're a pussy who can't stand a different opinion and seems to think the only friends you should have in your life are those you agree with 100%, which I know is a bit of a straw man, but I get the strange feeling my point stands. Why don't you actually talk to people who you disagree with, understand them, and if you can, change their mind? It's not difficult if your beliefs are correct. Anyway, I hope you all have a lovely day, especially you, Omid Djalili, and thank you all for listening.